4 things happened in the last 24 hours in the Nolan Wells case. 4. And if you only catch one of them, you are going to misunderstand this entire story. The FBI just put something in writing they have refused to say out loud for 2 weeks. The one witness everyone has been waiting on, the last person confirmed to speak to Nolan Wells, finally talked. Not to a reporter, not in a Facebook post. Face to face, with Nolan's own mother, in a room, this week. Somewhere in this case, right now, a family is under federal protection because someone sent them a threat serious enough to involve the Bureau. And yesterday, before any of this got resolved, before either autopsy came back, before a grand jury ever saw a single page of evidence, Nolan Wells was laid to rest, live, on camera, in front of the entire internet that has spent 2 weeks arguing about him. Stay with me, because tonight I'm not giving you speculation. I'm giving you exactly what's confirmed, exactly what's still just a claim, and exactly where the line between those two things sits. Because in this case, that line has mattered more than almost anything else. And by the end of this video, you'll understand something about yesterday's funeral that almost nobody is talking about yet. If you're passionate about uncovering the truth behind real criminal cases, subscribe to Midnight True Crime and turn on notifications. We bring you in-depth investigations, the latest case updates, and the details many people miss. Let's get into it. For 2 weeks, one question has hung over this entire case, unanswered, and it has quietly poisoned almost every theory floating around online. Why is the FBI even here? Every time federal involvement came up, it came up as a fragment, a line in one article, a vague mention in a press conference. Nobody had the full picture, and in a case like this, an information vacuum doesn't stay empty for long. People fill it, and what they filled it with over the last 2 weeks was 2 very different, very extreme theories. Some people decided FBI involvement meant this case had secretly escalated into something far darker than the public had been told. Others went the opposite direction, convinced federal agents were there to manage the story, not investigate it. A cover-up, dressed up as cooperation. This week, the Bureau's Jackson field office ended the guessing. They released a full, on-the-record statement, and I want you to actually hear what it says, because the wording matters. The FBI confirms it has been assisting Jackson County using federal tools and partnerships. It describes a working relationship with Jackson County built over years of prior cases. It states clearly that the FBI has been supporting this investigation from day one, gathering information, trying to help produce answers for Nolan's family and this community. And it closes by saying the Bureau remains ready to provide more federal resources if it means bringing this family clarity. Notice what that statement is not. It's not an announcement of a breakthrough. It's not a dramatic escalation. It reads almost like a hand extended toward the public, an attempt to lower the temperature on a question that had been quietly generating panic for 2 weeks straight. And that tells you something on its own. Federal agencies almost never comment publicly on active investigations. Silence is the default. The fact that the FBI broke from that default here, chose to go on record in full rather than simply decline comment, tells you they understood something. The ambiguity itself had become a problem. Silence in a case this saturated with theories doesn't read as neutral. It reads as confirmation of whatever rumor is loudest that day. Someone at that field office made a decision that speaking, even carefully, was better than staying quiet. That's worth noting before we go any further. So here's what we actually know now. Confirmed, in writing, the FBI is supporting, not leading. Jackson County remains fully in charge of this investigation from start to finish. That distinction is going to matter every single time this case comes up from here forward, so hold on to it. But buried inside that same statement is the actual answer to why the FBI is involved at all, and it's not what a lot of people assumed. The FBI states its efforts have specifically focused on interstate threats made against individuals connected to this case, not Nolan's death directly. Threats. And this work, they say, is running parallel to the Wells family's own independent investigation. Alongside it, not merged into it. Read that again, because it reframes the entire reason the federal government is anywhere near this story. It's not that Nolan's death itself became a federal case. It's that someone, somewhere, threatened people connected to this story badly enough, and used channels that cross state lines doing it, that it automatically became a federal matter, regardless of how big or small the underlying case is. For something to count as an interstate threat in the eyes of federal law, it typically just means one person in one state sent something threatening to someone in another state. A message, a call, something online. The internet crosses state lines by default, which is exactly why this kind of thing lands on the FBI's desk so easily. It doesn't require Nolan's death to be treated as a federal case at all. It only requires that somebody, somewhere, threatens somebody connected to it. Now here's the part I need you to sit with, because this is where a lot of coverage of this case has gone wrong. The FBI's statement does not say what those threats actually said. It does not say who received them. TMZ, reporting on this same statement, said plainly that it's still unclear exactly what kind of threats were made or who was on the receiving end. That gap matters because separate, unofficial reporting has circulated much more specific and much more graphic claims about threats sent to a family connected to one of the boys who was on that boat with Nolan. I want to be precise here because precision is the entire point of this channel. We know, officially, that interstate threats occurred and that federal resources are addressing them. We do not have official confirmation of what those threats specifically said or exactly who received them. Both of those things are true at the same time, and it is really important not to blur them together. There's a reason official statements almost always stay vague on this exact kind of detail, even when what happened is completely real and completely serious. Naming a specific victim or repeating specific threatening language in an official statement can itself cause more harm. It draws more attention to the exact people the investigation is trying to protect, and it can compromise whatever legal action eventually follows against whoever sent it. That restraint, even when it leaves us with less detail than we'd like, is usually a deliberate protective choice, not an attempt to hide anything. So what is beyond dispute? This: whoever is sending threats to anyone connected to this case, regardless of what they personally believe happened to Nolan, is committing a serious federal crime. Grief does not buy you the right to threaten a teenager, or a parent, or anyone else attached to this story by nothing more than bad timing. And think about what this does to the case itself. Every single witness in this story, every friend, every family member, every young woman who happened to spend 20 minutes talking to Nolan on a beach, is watching this unfold in real time. If coming forward, or simply being named publicly, carries the risk of threats serious enough to draw the FBI in, that creates a chilling effect on exactly the people this investigation needs cooperation from. Protecting people from retaliation here isn't just decency. It's operationally necessary if this case is ever going to get solved. That's the first thread. Now let's talk about the second one, because this is the development that actually changes the shape of this entire case. For 2 weeks, one name has sat at the center of the biggest unresolved contradiction in this entire case: Katie. She was the last person confirmed to speak with Nolan before he vanished, and for 2 weeks, everything attributed to her arrived secondhand. First through a family friend, relaying what they'd heard, then through Katie's own mother and sister, posting on Facebook to try to correct rumors that had already spiraled out of control. Every version of Katie's account, up until this week, had passed through at least one other person's memory before it reached the public. This week, that changed. Katie sat down, in person, face to face, with Nolan's own mother, Christine. I want you to actually register how significant that is. This is the first time information about that conversation has traveled directly from the one person who lived it to the one person who needs to understand it more than anyone else on earth, with nobody standing in between. And according to Christine, what Katie told her does not match the version of events that's been circulating for 2 weeks. Now, before you jump to the conclusion I know a lot of people are about to jump to, I need to walk you through Katie's actual account, because it is more specific and more limited than most of the public conversation around it has made it sound. Here's what Christine says Katie told her. Katie and Nolan met that day, spent time together, and eventually parted ways. Katie got back on a boat with her own friends, separate from Nolan's group. Based on their conversation, she assumed Nolan was heading back to rejoin his own friend's boat. Here's the detail that changes everything about how this should be understood. Katie never actually saw Nolan get on that boat. She assumed it, based on what he told her. She did not personally witness him rejoin his friends. Sit with that distinction for a second, because it is the whole ballgame. This is not a clean, direct contradiction. It's not one witness says X, another witness says Y, someone is lying. It's something closer to this. Nolan told Katie his intention. Whether he actually followed through on that intention, in the time between that conversation and whatever happened next, is something nobody, not Katie, not his friends, not his family, can currently confirm firsthand. That means two accounts that sound completely contradictory on the surface can both technically be true. An honest assumption, based on a real conversation, and a claim that he chose to stay, can both be accurate at different moments, if something changed in the gap between them. I think it's worth asking, honestly, why this nuance got flattened so fast in so much of the coverage around this case. A clean contradiction. One person says this, another says that, makes for a much better story than, he told her a plan and she had every reason to believe him. But Katie's actual position, as relayed by Christine, is the second one. Not a dramatic eyewitness reversal, a reasonable assumption that turned out to potentially not match what came next. And that reframes what actually needs explaining here. If Katie's account is accurate, the real mystery was never whether Nolan wanted to leave that beach. It's what happened in the gap between him saying that out loud and whatever came after. A gap that, as of tonight, literally nobody has been able to account for. That's thread number 2. Now let's talk about the part of this story that should make every single one of us uncomfortable. Before we continue, let us know your thoughts in the comments. What stands out to you most about this case? And if you enjoy detailed true crime documentaries, subscribe to Midnight True Crime for more stories like this. Separate from the FBI's statement, separate from Katie's account, reporting has emerged describing an actual threat received by a family connected to this case, specific enough that it would fall exactly under the category the FBI's own statement referenced. I want to handle this section carefully, for the exact reason I laid out a few minutes ago. The FBI has confirmed threats occurred, and that they're being addressed. It has not officially confirmed the specific content of any single threat, or named who received it. Some reporting has attributed detailed graphic threats to a specific family connected to one of the boys who was on that boat with Nolan. Until that specific reporting is confirmed by an actual official source, the responsible thing to do is treat it as credible, but unverified. Real enough to take seriously. Specific enough that it should not be repeated casually, like it's settled fact. Because if it turns out to be wrong in even one detail, we've just added another layer of harm on top of a family that may already be terrified. What is not in question at all is this. Someone is threatening people who had nothing to do with whatever actually happened to Nolan Wells beyond bad timing and proximity. A teenager, a parent, possibly more than one family. That is a crime. Full stop, regardless of what theory the person sending it believes. And here's the part that should genuinely worry anyone following this case, whether you're emotionally invested in it or not. Think about what this does to every future witness, every friend of Nolan's who was on that island, every young woman who happened to talk to him for 20 minutes on a beach, every person who might have information that could actually move this investigation forward. If speaking up, or simply being named publicly, carries a real risk of becoming a target, that creates a chilling effect that works directly against finding out what happened to Nolan. Protecting the people connected to this story isn't separate from solving it. It's a precondition for solving it. I also want to name something about how this kind of thing spreads, because it's a pattern that shows up in almost every high-profile case like this one, and it's worth understanding once so you can spot it every time going forward. A vague official statement about threats, in less careful hands, becomes a detailed account naming a specific family and quoting specific violent language, whether or not any of that's actually been verified. That kind of embellishment doesn't just risk being factually wrong. It risks compounding the exact harm the original threat was designed to cause, by keeping a terrified family's situation circulating publicly long after the threat itself. Being careful about that distinction isn't about downplaying what happened. It's about not becoming another link in the chain that keeps spreading it. Let's step back from the threats in Katie's account for a second, because there's an entire investigation running underneath all of this, and it's easy to lose track of exactly how many moving parts are active at once. Following the July 15th meeting between Nolan's parents and the Jackson County District Attorney, Attorney Ben Crump confirmed the case will be handed to a grand jury once the underlying investigation wraps up. He's also confirmed Nolan's phone will undergo a coordinated review, his own independent investigators examining it alongside law enforcement's own findings. Sheriff John Ledbetter has been direct about what his office owes this family: a thorough, factual investigation, and that's exactly what they intend to deliver. The state autopsy, conducted the Tuesday after Nolan's body was recovered, is still pending. The independent autopsy out of Washington, D.C. hasn't produced results either. Count them with me, because this is genuinely easy to lose track of. The Sheriff's Department's own investigation. The DA's office, now coordinating directly with the family toward a grand jury referral. The family's independent investigation, staffed with former law enforcement and federal agents. The state autopsy. The independent autopsy. And now, a coordinated review of Nolan's phone involving both sides. 6 separate processes, running at the same time, each on its own timeline, each with its own standard for what actually counts as confirmed. Keeping those straight, and not assuming a development in one automatically means something for the others, is genuinely part of what makes this case so hard to follow accurately. And it's exactly why so much misinformation has already taken root around it. Now, that grand jury referral hasn't landed as unambiguous good news for everyone watching this case. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore has publicly raised concerns about the DA's office, pointing to what he describes as a history in a previous, unrelated case, a fatal police shooting where he says overwhelming evidence still failed to produce an indictment. He said he intends to keep watching this case closely to make sure it doesn't quietly stall the way he believes that earlier case did. A different attorney, Tyler Bailey, offered a more measured take, explaining that a grand jury referral is actually standard, routine procedure in this county for any death considered unnatural or suspicious, not, on its own, proof that foul play has been confirmed or even strongly suspected. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Skepticism rooted in real, specific history with this particular prosecutor's office, and an explanation rooted in how these referrals typically function as a matter of ordinary process. This can be standard procedure, and this specific office's track record can still deserve close attention. The real test was never the referral itself. It's what actually happens once a grand jury has whatever evidence this investigation ultimately produces sitting in front of it. Before we get to tomorrow, I want to walk back through 2 claims that spread hard earlier in this case, because both of them shaped what people believed before anyone had actually verified either one. And getting this right matters for how carefully you should treat everything else in this video. The first was a photo showing Nolan at a pool party, which a lot of people took as proof he was alive after the 4th of July. Rolling Stone confirmed, through image metadata and an account from his friend Traycon Shepard, that the photo was actually taken on June 27th, a full week before Nolan ever set foot on Horn Island. The second was a viral clip many believed had captured Nolan in an argument shortly before he disappeared. Shepard has confirmed, repeatedly and directly, that the voice on that recording is his own, not Nolan's. Both of those corrections trace back to the exact same underlying pattern. In the vacuum created by 2 still-pending autopsies, unverified claims have consistently moved faster than confirmed facts. That pattern is worth keeping in your head with literally every new detail in this case, including everything I just told you tonight. Confirmed information and secondhand claims can look identical at first glance. The only way to actually tell them apart is to keep asking, every single time, exactly where a detail came from. As all of this continued to unfold, Nolan's family did something yesterday no parent should ever have to do. The funeral was held yesterday, Monday, at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation in the morning and the service beginning immediately after. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated. Here's a detail that hasn't gotten much attention, and I think it should. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center's own commission actually voted unanimously to offer their venue for this service, free of charge. The family ultimately chose Centerpoint Church instead, and the Coliseum responded not with any hint of offense, but with a public statement saying they support the family's decision and remain committed to supporting them and this community through this. That small exchange, a venue offering itself, being turned down, and responding with genuine grace anyway, says something about how this community has shown up for this family that's easy to miss underneath everything else happening in this case. For anyone who couldn't be there in person, the funeral was live-streamed in full, both on the church's website and on YouTube, which meant people following this story from anywhere in the country were able to watch the actual service happen in real time. I want you to think about what that really means for a second. A funeral, in almost every normal circumstance, is one of the most private, intimate rituals a family goes through. A closed circle of grief shared only with the people who actually knew the person being buried. This funeral was the opposite of that. Broadcast live, watched by an audience that has spent over 2 weeks debating GPS pings, contested witness accounts, and viral clips. Invited to witness the actual human cost sitting behind all of it. That is an enormous, almost unheard of level of public exposure for a family's private grief. And it's worth remembering, now that yesterday's coverage is settling, that what was live streamed was a real funeral for a real 18-year-old. Not the next episode in an ongoing story. I think it's worth naming plainly what yesterday meant sitting inside everything else happening around it. This is a family that has spent the last 2.5 weeks fighting publicly, relentlessly, for answers about how their son died, while simultaneously being forced to plan his funeral in full public view. Yesterday, those two threads collided directly. The same press that has covered every twist in this investigation was present for a service that Christine herself has described as built around celebrating who Nolan actually was, rather than dwelling in the suspicion and grief that has otherwise defined this entire story. And there's something worth sitting with about the timing of everything covered tonight landing on the exact eve of this funeral. The FBI's statement, Katie's account, the threat reporting. All of it arrived in the final hours before Nolan was laid to rest, which meant his family walked into yesterday carrying every one of these open threads with them, completely unresolved. They stood in that church, celebrating their son's life, while a grand jury referral sits somewhere out in the future, while 2 autopsies remain unfinished, while a contradiction about his final conversation remains unsettled, while, according to some reporting, a threat investigation continues quietly in the background. Grief, in this case, has never once gotten the chance to exist on its own, separate from everything else surrounding it. Yesterday didn't change that, even as it gave this family a few hours explicitly set aside to try. So let's pull this together, because a lot landed tonight, and I want you walking away from this with the actual shape of it, not just the headlines. The FBI has now put its role in this case on the record in full, confirming real assistance, specifically tied to addressing interstate threats made against people connected to this story, while making clear Jackson County remains firmly in the lead throughout. Katie, the witness at the center of this case's central contradiction, has finally spoken directly, meeting face-to-face with Nolan's own mother, and offering an account that is more nuanced than most of the public conversation has suggested, an assumption about Nolan's intentions, not a first-hand confirmation of what actually happened after they parted ways, and reporting, still not officially confirmed in its specific details, describes a family connected to this case receiving threats serious enough to fall under exactly what that FBI statement addressed. Yesterday, Nolan Wells was laid to rest, in a service his family deliberately built around celebration rather than sorrow, live-streamed for anyone who wanted to be there, without being there. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. 2 autopsies still haven't told his family how he died. A grand jury is waiting somewhere down the road. And in the meantime, this case keeps generating exactly the kind of pain, threats, hostility, public suspicion, that everyone connected to it never asked to become a part of. His friends. A young woman who simply spoke to him on a beach. And now, according to reporting, possibly an entire family. Here's the broader shape of tonight worth sitting with as we close this out. 4 separate threads: the FBI's statement, Katie's account, the threat reporting, and yesterday's funeral, each represent a completely different kind of institution, or relationship, being tested by this case at the exact same moment. A federal agency forced to explain itself publicly. A young woman forced into becoming a central witness in a story she never asked to be part of. A family forced to live under active protection from people who wish them harm, for nothing more than their proximity to this tragedy. And a grieving mother and father forced to bury their son under a level of public scrutiny almost no family in their position has ever had to endure. And it's worth remembering just how much this single week actually clarified, even without resolving anything. 2 weeks ago, This case was dominated almost entirely by anonymous claims, viral clips stripped of context, and competing second-hand accounts. This week brought something different, an actual federal agency speaking on the record, a key witness finally heard from directly, instead of through relatives, and a level of specificity about threats, timelines, and process that simply didn't exist before. None of that adds up to an answer yet, but it is, undeniably, a more grounded, more documented case than it was even a few days ago. What comes next, in the most literal sense, is everything that was already in motion before yesterday. A phone that still hasn't been jointly examined, 2 autopsies that still haven't produced results, and a contradiction about Nolan's final conversation that even Katie's own direct account hasn't fully closed. None of that paused for the funeral, and none of it gets resolved just because the service is over. We are staying on this story through both autopsy results and through whatever comes next as this moves toward a grand jury. We'll bring you the facts exactly as we get them confirmed, and not one moment before. If you found this documentary informative, subscribe to Midnight True Crime and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We cover the facts, follow the evidence, and bring you the latest developments in the cases that matter most. And before you go, we'd like to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest unanswered question in the Nolan Wells investigation? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, please keep the discussion respectful. The headlines may fade, but the search for truth never ends. This is Midnight True Crime. We'll see you in the next investigation.